speaking of being African girls, why do you think the home is so hostile to young African women, especially eldest daughters? Why do you think home is very uncomfortable? Yeah.
Um, I feel like this question is interesting because I cannot speak it from first experience. Like I feel like my mom has really tried her hardest to make it as fair as possible growing up between me and my brother. Obviously, sometimes biases come up, right? But I think that compared to like my other friends or yourself, like other friends that are first daughters that tell me about their life at home, mine was definitely on the lower end of the
Yeah.
toxicity, right? Um, and but I think in general, why home is uncomfortable for eldest daughters is because you're playing two roles. You're the child and you're the parent at the same time. And it should never be like that. And so the first time, the first second you have like the second you have the opportunity to leave, you dip out. And you're like, I want, for the first time in my life, I want to live for me. And the reason why I say you're the child and the parent is because as the eldest daughter, you're expected to take care of your youngest siblings,
Yeah.
but you're also a child, so you're like trying to
Yeah.
figure these things out, and you're not equipped. Like I think as adults we can kind of handle things a little bit different. We can handle ambiguity and unknowns a little bit better than children, but for eldest daughters are never granted
Yeah.
that chance of being just a child.
Yeah.
But what about you? I feel like you have better experience and,
This is it.
and
This.
more to say about this.
I think it's so funny how you say this because, like, one, I think another thing about eldest daughters I've noticed is that, like, because we are both parents and kids, whenever the parents start acting mad, we become the defenders of our younger siblings. I don't know about elder sons, but whenever I remember I saw a video where like a man was about to hit his wife, right? And it was an African video, and then you see the eldest daughter really defending her mother. You just see the mother being a coward, not being a coward, but she's like an abused woman. She's so used to it. I feel like eldest daughters are expected to, they just have this, they create courage, they produce this amount of courage that just does not, children are not expected to have. They show up in the world with, and are expected, like you said, to just be, also to be a child and an adult, but they also are required to consistently defend and protect their younger siblings, who are children too, who are literally children. The privilege of childhood is stripped away from eldest daughters. They automatically become workhorses, defenders, caretakers, providers too. And I think as a society, because more of our safety nets are being stripped, like we don't have the communal care where you're sure that like you're living in a compound with your 10 other sister wives and you're sure somebody's raising the children. Now, first daughters have to fill that gap if you cannot afford childcare elsewhere. I also think that when you're an eldest daughter, if you haven't spent time living with other people, you end up picking the worst parts of your parents. And so one thing like I really had to unlearn was like my parents' bad behavior when I decided to live on my own, because I just did not know otherwise. And the thing about time is that time does make things better. So like a lot of the youngest kids might meet your parents when they're like older and they are just, their bad habits no longer show as much, or they have far more influences because they have older siblings. But the worst part about being an eldest child is that you don't even learn how your parents influence you until you're no longer under their roof. And you have to start unlearning so many things. I don't know. I just wish that like adults really did far more work on themselves before they had children. Because that first child just ends up
It
being the
would make a
casualty of
lot
a
of
lot of,
yeah.
like that first child ends up
Yeah.
being the casualty of a lot of poor parenting mistakes. And I also hate the fact that like socioeconomically, if you're like an immigrant and you move abroad, because you don't have that safety net of your neighbor, your cousin, your sister, that first child automatically fills that role of support at home. So I just think people should have less kids and they should just like work on themselves before they have kids. Like
Yeah.
it's unfair for a child to be brought into a world where they're expected to fill some role before they're actually even brought in.
Yeah.
And some days I see women who work very hard and they are always on their game, and they just never seem to rest. And I'm just like, this is probably a woman who never had the privilege of rest while growing up. Like, she probably just never had that opportunity. So now this is like her default mode. I don't know, but like, I just know like my first daughter is actually going to enjoy her life. Like, she's not going to be here trying to pick up extra slack. Like, for me, whenever I see people have kids, maybe it's because I'm so radically aware of how difficult it is to raise kids. There is no way I'm bringing a child into this world without a plethora of resources at my disposal. But yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And like it was also part of like the whole motivation of going to school because I was like, all of this the shit I'm going through, my kids will never have to go through this.
Exactly.
Like I want my kids to be trust fund babies. I
Okay.
want them to like I want them to be these like how people hate like trust fund babies or like they have this whole but in the end, are you not working towards getting there
Fam.
yourself, right?
I hate the internet because it makes people lie and deceive themselves. Best believe the people who have resources are keeping them for their kids. They are not waiting for you. They don't care if you have to guilt trip their kids a million times. Oh, I am aware of my privilege as a this. Bitch, they're still keeping those resources. My child will never even know what economy class is. My child, like, their worldview will be so different from my worldview. When we'll be getting on the plane, they automatically know they just sit on the first two rows. That's how they literally will navigate the world. I don't, and if people don't like that, best believe resources are being hoarded more and more. So this, I apologize for my privilege. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Absolutely. I guess the only thing though is like I cannot afford to have a kid that's a brat though. I feel like that would annoy me.
I even think that like kids automatically learn things from their parents. So like I do think that like even if you have money but your child sees you working hard, the child will literally just work hard around you.
Yeah.
And literally if the child works hard, like they will, even if they do some of these businesses, artisanal, handcrafted, booty licked hair, I don't know, some kind of nonsense business that rich people do, like they will work very hard at it because they're just accustomed to seeing their parents work hard. And another thing is that like I think I've learned that like problems don't have any there are clearly problems that poor people face more, but I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but there are problems that rich people also face. So even if you're rich, you're not completely protected from all the trials and tribulations that come from life. And my goal is to make my life easier for my child. It's not to make them suffer so that they can have some kind of character development. Nah, fam, I don't mind if my child is one of the underdeveloped characters. They have an easier life. I did my job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. But I think something that really... What?
No, please keep going.
No, I also think that another thing that like I feel very bad about for eldest daughters is how we're like unable to like a lot of times now choose not to have kids because we just spent so much of our childhood raising kids. Like I have an aunt who, when her mother passed away when they were young, and they had like 11 kids in their family. Then my aunt, she was the second child, and she literally ended up raising her entire siblings, and today she don't have kids. And I think a part of it stems from the fact that like she likes enjoying her life. She finally now has the money to actually enjoy her life, and she now is actually a very wonderful aunt to her nieces and nephews. But like I do not blame this woman for not having her own children, because she knows how it feels to raise somebody else's kids. And I wish that like it's society is not willing to have the conversation of the fact that like it's becoming increasingly difficult to have children, and more people opt out of it unless there's some kind of societal change where like they have made it significantly cheaper and easier to have children. Anticipate that fewer and fewer people will have kids, and in fact anticipate that the people who should have been having kids, like the eldest daughters who have actually raised kids already, who are experiencing this, will be the ones not having them, and those who don't know anything will give birth to a million of them. So
yeah. I think that it's also to speak to the quantity, right? I only had to deal with my brother. You had to deal with what? Six kids? Five. So imagine that. Like, and I feel like my brother, I love him to death. I would go to war for him, but it really took out so much of my energy. Right? But I think still, nonetheless, I'm more willing to have children than you. So it's also you have to consider like how many of your siblings you had to raise. I only had to raise one, and the age gap was 3 years. So it was it was okay, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for you, like you had to raise five of them, and then one was a boy, four girls, different age gaps. Like I feel like that's even 10 times harder, and that's why you're even more inclined to not have kids. Because like I had to raise four kids in my
Yeah.
childhood. Yeah,